Hello and welcome friend. So in this video we are going to see main app service. So as of now, in previous video we have seen the user service, portfolio service and mutual fund service. So mutual fund service have the individual mutual fund data, and portfolio service will have the user ID with portfolio ID. In that it will have the holding list which is the ID of my mutual fund. Okay, and user service will have the user information like email ID and his details, credit score and all. So now we are going to do like main app service will communicate between these three of service. So how we are going to do that one? We have the multiple services, and we are going to implement now main app service. So you need to create C Spring Boot application with dependency having web Spring Boot web. You need to add the dependency, and then dependency if you want that dev tools like runtime, if you want that whatever you change it will affect your server, so that you can add dev tool as well. And that test JUnit that will come with that only. So like after creating an application you will get the pom.xml like this, and application.properties will be the default one. So you need to give the port of that application, like on which port we are going to run this application. So I'm going to use 9094 here. Now come to the main part, like once you have the application you will get main app service application.java. In that you will have this one as the default one, public static void main with main app service dot class comma args. So from here your application will get start. It will load that Spring Boot application in the container, and here we are going to use the REST template to access the user service, portfolio service and our mutual fund service. So let me show you the Pojo first, so that you will get some idea. So in mutual fund service, like whatever the response is coming from that service, I need to create the Pojo same as that, so that I will get that JSON data directly in that one. So you need to create a private variable here, and default constructor, then parameterize constructor and set runs getter for the variables. So now come to the user.java. In that same, like whatever the response we are getting from that service, we are going to use the same variable here as well. User ID, username, user email, credit score and portfolio ID, same like that. Default constructor, parameterized constructor and getter and setters for the this private variable. You don't need to add the toString here. Like if you want to print that object at the runtime, then you can use that one, otherwise not required here. And portfolio will have the same thing, like it will have the list of the string as the holding list. PFID will have total invested, total gain and user ID, like which from which user is having this portfolio. So we'll have the user ID here, and same like default constructor, parameterized constructor, get setters for this private variable. Now this is the main user output which we are going to show to, which we are going to pass to our this investment dashboard. So like it will my main app service will going to take all this data and bind in one object, and it will send to the investment dashboard. So we'll have this user output. In that I have defined my private variable as the user, then private portfolio, private mf list. Like in that we'll have the mutual fund list. So I've created the mf list here, and the same like we will have, we need that parameter constructor and getter and setters here. So come to the main controller now. So to access this service, we need to call this main app service as the mapping in URL. And once the mapping get found, it will come to this request mapping, which need to have the user ID. And you need to add this as the REST controller and request mapping as the annotation here. So we have two methods to create an object in Spring, as I'm going to use here the auto add. Like we can use here the new object also, but as we are going to use the Spring, so we can use the auto add. For auto add you need to define this object at bean, so that we'll get that object using auto add directly. So what we are going to do here, a public REST template, it will going to return me the REST template, and we are going to return a new object as a REST template. So this much only, and it will give me the object once I required here. So I'm going to use at auto add here. So now come to the next part. So like at if the mapping found of the user ID, then it will get called for this function get user by id. We are going to use the path variable here, and it will store that value in the user id variable. Now using the first user info service, we are going to pass the user id, and the response whatever we are getting, we need to store in the user.class which we have defined in this user.java project. So the syntax is like that: rest stamp dot get for object, and then we need to pass the url, and then we are going to use the object in which we need to bind that user object. Same for the portfolio also. We are going to use the portfolio service, and we are passing the user like we are passing the portfolio id here, and using that portfolio id we are going to store that data in the portfolio.class. So once we have the pf, in that we will have the holding list. So we are just getting that holding list in the mfid list, and we are iterating one by one, and we are calling our mutual fund service with that mfid, and storing that object in the mutual fund id. And after that we are adding that mutual fund id in the user mf list. So we need one user mf list, like list of the mutual fund, which we need to define here. And once we have, we are going to add the whatever the holding list the user having. We're going to iterate it one by one, and we are going to store that in the user mf list object. So once we have all this thing, we are going to call our one of the big use like object. In that we are going to pass as the user pf and user mf list. So it will going to return me that object on the front end. So let me show you the output, and let me run all these services.